Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm John Carroll in for Maya Tribulsi. California is suing the Trump administration over the military response to protests in Los Angeles, protests over the objection of local officials. KPBS military reporter Andrew Dyer says signals from the administration indicate troop deployments in response to protests will grow.
700 Marines from 29 Palms and 4,000 National Guard soldiers could be just the beginning of an expanded domestic role for the military. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told the House Appropriations Subcommittee on Defense today service members are critical to domestic security.
I think we're entering another phase, especially under President Trump with his focus on the homeland, where the National Guard and Reserves become a critical component of how we secure that homeland.
There's a couple reasons why this situation is so unprecedented. The first,
Janessa Goldbeck is a San Diego Marine veteran and the CEO of the Vet Voice Foundation, a nonprofit that works to get veterans involved in advocacy.
This is the first time in over 60 years that a president has deployed the National Guard against the wishes of local law enforcement and the sitting governor. We in this country have the most professional fighting force in the world, and we have a force that is apolitical. And when the president is directing active duty military to do law enforcement in the streets, that puts them in a very political position.
Resistance to using the military for domestic law enforcement is more than 900 years old. It's first mentioned in the Magna Carta. The Insurrection Act, which was last updated in 1874, would allow the president to use the military for law enforcement. It was last invoked in 1992 by President George H.W. Bush during an uprising over the Rodney King police brutality trial verdict. Trump hasn't invoked that law yet, but his latest orders don't limit his authority to deploy troops just to Los Angeles. Instead, his executive order says he can deploy troops to cities where protests are either occurring or are likely to occur in order to protect federal agents and property. Goldbeck says that has broader implications.
It seems that the president is looking for pretense to deploy these troops into the streets as a way of reshaping really how Americans view military power and who it belongs to. And in this case, it seems the president is very intent on reshaping the military to be his own force to be used for political purposes.
There was some confusion about the Marine deployment Monday when Hegseth said on X that 700 Marines were deploying to Los Angeles from Camp Pendleton. U.S. Northern Command tells KPBS the San Diego County base houses the headquarters element for the 1st Marine Division, but that the battalion deploying to L.A. is coming from 29 Palms in San Bernardino County. Other users of the website that used to be Twitter shared photos of a Marine convoy en route to Los Angeles from Camp Pendleton, but those were from the 1992 deployment, not this week's. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
Meanwhile, in San Diego, the local chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations and immigrants' rights groups rallied in front of San Diego International Airport today to protest the latest travel ban. KPBS reporter Alexander Nguyen was there.
As international travelers from Japan arrived in San Diego, they were met with protesters against the Trump administration's latest travel ban.
Racist ban against Muslims and African countries.
The ban went into effect Monday and applies to 12 countries and also imposes heightened restrictions on 7 others. Afghanistan, where thousands await U.S. resettlement, is included in the ban. Muntas Moman has been trying to bring his family and fiancé from Afghanistan here for several years.
It's abuse of power. They're systematically, attacking the refugees, vulnerable people. And I'm one of them. Even though I have citizenship, for this government, my citizenship doesn't mean anything.
Moman is frustrated because he's met with roadblock after roadblock.
It took a little bit longer than it was. So the first one was the travel ban, right? And then there was before care team. The care team got canceled.
When President Donald Trump announced the ban, he said it was a way to protect the United States.
The strength of the restrictions we're applying depends on the severity of the threat posed. The list is subject to revision based on whether material improvements are made, and likewise, new countries can be added as threats emerge around the world.
The people of the rally say the travel ban isn't about safety, but rather it is a racist policy meant to attack and punish immigrants.
It is racist because it only includes Muslims and black Africans and brown people from South America. And it is un-American because it goes against the principles and the values and the foundations of the United States of America.
Imam Taha Hassan and the rest of the people of the rally are calling on local congressional delegates to pass the No Ban Act, which limits the president's power to enact travel bans. Alexander Nguyen, KPBS News.
The search has been suspended for 6 people who were aboard a small airplane that crashed off the coast of Point Loma. The U.S. Coast Guard called off its efforts to find the victims' remains this morning after 2 days of searching. The twin-engine Cessna 414 went down Sunday afternoon on its way to Phoenix. The pilot, his wife, another man, and that man's 3 sons are believed to have died in the crash.
I'm Ariella Scalise. Tonight, temperatures dropping back to the 60s as clouds move back in. And coming up, we're going to talk about the temperature roller coaster ride getting cooler, warming back up, and then cooling back down again. We'll have a closer look.
The San Diego City Council is about to vote on the 2026 city budget amid a $300 million deficit. KPBS reporter Jacob Ayer is live in the newsroom. And Jacob, the council is at odds with Mayor Todd Gloria over what and how much to cut, right?
That's right, John. After months of discussion, City Council is looking to approve the City of San Diego's budget. Funding cuts for libraries, parks, and rec centers across the city are just a couple of the many issues at stake for this year's budget. But the cuts won't be as substantial as they could have been. On Monday, the City Council approved a controversial trash fee for single-family homeowners. Each homeowner will pay $44 a month for trash starting in July. At the heart of this year's deficit is the fact that the city is not bringing in as much as it's spending. In an attempt to help offset this current year's budget for 2025, the City Council authorized the use of $10.1 million in reserves to balance the current fiscal year's budget on a 6-2 vote today. That was before approving the city's 2026 budget. Mayor Todd Gloria's proposed cuts include closing the city's 37 libraries on Sundays and Mondays, starting as early as July 1st. This afternoon, dozens of residents showed up, with many opposed to funding for automated license plate readers used by the San Diego Police Department, and spoke in support of keeping full park and rec facilities.
And I'm wondering, why can't we just get a grip and say, that's enough? You can't come to a city council and ask for $29 million and tell us you're going to take parks from children. That's a non-starter. When was that day going to come? When is the moral courage of this council going to say that day is here? You cannot do that.
4 council members proposed a modified version of the budget, which would restore some library and recreation center hours. They want to use revenue from new parking fees to help make up the difference. They also propose leaving open city positions vacant. District 6 council member Kent Lee spoke before the afternoon session about the strategy.
And we're proposing changes that will make City Hall slimmer so that city services don't suffer. We're restructuring management, responsibly generating revenue, and as a result, restoring parks, libraries, and lakes.
Gloria can veto those budget changes from City Council, and the council needs a supermajority vote to override his veto before the fiscal year begins in July. Reporting from the newsroom, Jacob Ayer, KPBS News.
Jacob, thank you. As the Trump administration intensifies its immigration crackdown, privacy advocates are renewing calls to terminate a controversial police surveillance program. Experts tell KPBS reporter Gustavo Solis the San Diego Police Department's license plate reader program may violate state law.
License plate readers are fascinating. You can map people's movements with license plates readers because your car goes from one intersection with a license plate reader to another intersection with a license plate reader, to a third, and you can map where that car goes.
That is Tim Blood, chair of the city's Privacy Advisory Board, explaining how the San Diego Police Department's automated license plate reader program works. It pulls millions of data points into a database that police can use to solve crimes. The system allows SDPD to share data with federal agencies, including Customs and Border Protection and Homeland Security investigations. Critics of the program say the data sharing likely violates a state law passed in 2015 that prohibits local police departments from sharing license plate data with federal law enforcement agencies. Lily Irani is with San Diego's Trust Coalition. That's a group of more than 30 advocacy organizations asking the city council to eliminate the program.
Pull the funding entirely from the license plate reader systems. At a time when libraries and parks are being cut, there's no reason why we should be investing in infrastructure that makes us less safe.
The Privacy Advisory Board recommends that SDPD stop sharing data with federal law enforcement, even if the city keeps the program going. Blood says that they're working with department officials to address the issue.
They've been very cooperative. I mean, I want to be clear. They have been very cooperative, very open to our ideas, very willing to talk to us.
He says that one of the biggest obstacles is not with the police, is that the city has not given the All-Volunteer Advisory Board the resources it needs to review and develop new policies. Gustavo Solis, KPBS News.
I'm Amna Navaz. Tonight on the NewsHour, President Trump sends more National Guard troops to Los Angeles as protests spread to multiple cities nationwide. It's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
People coming to the U.S. to study and work get caught up in the politics of immigration. People call it a theft of American jobs or a brain drain from other countries. But a San Diego economist says overall, it's a gain for both the U.S. and the workers' home countries. KPBS Sci-Tech reporter Thomas Fudge has more.
Skilled foreign workers in the U.S. are controversial for a variety of reasons, but economics professor Gaurav Khanna says those who see only the negative effects mistakenly believe that migration is a zero-sum game.
When immigrants come, they take away jobs, so there must be zero-sum. On the other side, when you think of origin countries, the countries that send immigrants, right, there's this conception that it's a zero-sum game in the sense that you're losing kind of the brightest minds when these folks leave the country.
But he says when you look at the data, it's clear that there are not only winners and losers when students and workers migrate to the U.S. The situation is much more nuanced. In fact, Khanna suggests it's a win-win situation even as it defies many hopes and expectations. Consider the example of an Indian native trained in science and engineering who dreams of getting a high-paying job in Silicon Valley. But their work visa runs out or they can't get one in the first place.
So they stay back in India. But what that means is that in the long run in India, there is kind of a skilled workforce, right? They're trained, they're ready to work. And so the Indian firms then tap into the skilled workforce and the Indian tech boom takes off.
American firms also see that skilled workforce overseas and they offshore jobs to India. Khanna says a similar situation has occurred with Filipino nurses trained in the U.S.
The U.S. really needed a lot of nurses, and so they made it easier for Filipino nurses to come to the U.S. But what that led to was a lot of women in the Philippines started getting nursing degrees. They started going to medical school.
And those Filipino nurses who did get jobs in the United States, they send a lot of money back home, creating more wealth for their families and more educational options for Filipino kids. So, what has the U.S. gained from the migration and training of skilled foreign workers? Khanna points out what he calls the downstream benefits of the innovations that are tied to foreign workers.
You know, if you think of the car manufacturing sector in Detroit, it's very far from Silicon Valley, but it uses a lot of software, not just in the production process, but our cars actually have software in it. Now, that innovation actually occurred in Silicon Valley by a bunch of Indian immigrants.
Americans of most political stripes see things in this global economy that they don't like. But Khanna argues that the end result is not a brain drain, but a brain gain for those countries involved. The paper he co-authored is published in the journal Science. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
For the first time, single-family homeowners in the city of San Diego will pay for trash collection. The city council approved a new trash fee schedule in a 6-3 vote yesterday. Customers would see a first-year fee of $523, which breaks down to about $43 per month. That's for a standard 95-gallon bin. The decision came after a lengthy public hearing. A majority in attendance opposed the proposal.
If we do not pass a trash fee as articulated in the motion, we will blow at least an $80 million hole in that budget.
So the people who can't afford to pay these fees will say, you know what, I'm tired of paying for, cities' excess mismanagement, and I'm going to leave.
There are cheaper rates offered for smaller bins. We'll have a full breakdown of the newly adopted fee and how it came about on tomorrow's Evening Edition. It's going to cost you more to cool your home this summer, but there are things you can do to help relieve the sticker shock. Jen Sullivan has tips on how to lower your utility bills during the hotter months.
Summers are getting hotter, and more areas of the country are seeing significant heat waves, and those high temperatures are driving up energy costs as people try and stay cool.
As we're seeing higher temperatures, people are flocking inside and keeping their air conditioners turned up. So
Jennifer Amon with the American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, known as ACEEE, says rising temperatures means rising prices.
We really are seeing this happening across the country.
This year, the average electric bill between June and September is projected to reach $784, according to the National Energy Assistance Directors Association. That's more than 4% higher than last year when adjusted for inflation. Depending on where you live, those costs could be higher or lower.
People can be really shocked when they get those first bills, particularly if their rates have changed in their region.
There are things you can do to help cut those rising costs.
One of the best things you can do is insulate your home. Insulate and air seal.
Raising the temperature on your thermostat by even 2 degrees when you're not home can help.
You can set it up a few degrees and you'll save, 5 to 10% on your cooling.
Other things you can do, make sure your HVAC system isn't more than 20 years old. Shades can make a big difference in keeping rooms cool. Eamon says don't use your dryer, dishwasher, or even the oven in the middle of the day. All of those appliances generate heat and will make your house hotter. And only use ceiling fans in occupied rooms. Otherwise, it's just going to waste energy. For Consumer Watch, I'm Jen Sullivan. And let's start by looking at those weather headlines. The big thing is going to be this temperature roller coaster right after getting warm. Temperatures will start cooling here Wednesday through Friday, and we'll start to see some low clouds drifting from the coast even into the valleys. But as we head into the weekend, we will start to warm on up with the shallower marine layer. And then early next week, we'll start to cool down again, right? So you're following this roller coaster ride here of temperatures up and down over the next week. We'll start with tonight as we'll drop into the 60s along the coast there at Oceanside, 60 degrees, 62 in San Diego. Mount Laguna, even a pretty mild night at 62, and Borrego Springs down to about 68 degrees. You can still see where a lot of that heat is through the day on Wednesday, but starting to notice a little bit of cooling coming towards the coast. It may wait a little bit more until we head closer to Thursday and Friday. We'll look into a hot day for Borrego Springs at 105 degrees, 75 Mount Laguna. Oceanside, San Diego, and Chula Vista will all keep temperatures near about 70 degrees, so getting some of that coastal influence. By the time we head into Thursday, you can see how the color here turns from red to orange. So we go from hot to very warm conditions that we've been tracking. A lot of the heat, especially through the deserts, will get a little bit more comfortable as we get into the weekend. We'll take you out through the coast, the 5-day outlook here with 70s, and then notice how we start to climb on up as we head into the day on Sunday. We'll look at 80s, low 80s becoming upper 80s as we warm up through the weekend. Taking a closer look at the forecast for the mountains, and we'll be watching that temperature roller coaster as well, where we'll start to lower a little bit and then come back up as we head into the day on Sunday. It's going to be a warm one, plenty of sunshine with temperatures into the mid-80s. And we'll take you to the desert where 105 on Wednesday, and then we'll continue to see temperatures climbing. Look at this, 112 by Saturday. For KPBS News, I'm Ariella Scalise.
Alex Tardy has ushered San Diegans through fires, floods, even the occasional tsunami warning. As a meteorologist for the National Weather Service, Tardy has talked about all things climate-related to KPBS's audience in San Diego and elsewhere for 32 years. He retired in April amid proposed radical cuts that would severely weaken the United States weather forecasting capabilities. He spoke to KPBS's Amitha Sharma.
Alex, before we get into why you left the National Weather Service in April, talk to me about the importance of weather forecasting. It's not just about telling us whether we should take an umbrella before we leave the house in the morning, is it?
Just looking at your phone gives you the weather forecast information. What's so important is that National Weather Service meteorologists can warn you ahead of time about dangerous, threatening weather. They can save your life and property in severe weather situations.
Alex, you wrote in your retirement announcement that while there was a lot to consider, great staff, unfinished work, there were limitations that tipped your decision toward retirement. Explain.
Yeah, this is the first time in my career. So I just finished 32 years in federal government, National Weather Service. This is the first time where I was restricted where I could go, what I could say, who I could meet with. And I'm talking about important meetings like government agencies, media. And so that's something I'd never felt or experienced before in my whole career.
What kind of explanation were you given for those limitations?
Some of it was where travel was banned, basically, as simple as that, no explanation. Or our government credit cards were reduced to $1. Other situations, it was you had to prove that it was an emergency, life-threatening situation to meet with any group or any agency.
Where was travel banned?
Travel was banned even locally, and I had never experienced that before. The only time I've felt that type of limit or impact was during a government shutdown, and that affects everyone and everything, even military sometimes. So that's how severe it was, even local, but certainly any regional or national travel to a conference, to a meeting, was not allowed.
So what impact do even changes like that have on the practice of weather prediction for San Diego and across the country?
Well, part of our weather prediction and our climate monitoring is having relationships with other groups because we can't do it all ourselves. We rely on universities, government agencies. We rely on you, the media, to get messages out there about Santa Ana winds and red flag warnings. So there's huge impact when you're not able to get out of the office, meet with people. That was a key component of my job for years, was developing relationships, meeting with people, understanding what they need, how they respond, and relaying them, when it counted, important weather information.
The National Weather Service has lost more than 500 employees through layoffs and early retirement and for other reasons. It is now hiring back about 100 employees to, quote, stabilize operations after a public backlash. Is that enough?
If we just pick up another 125 or so, it's going to take a long time to train them, spin them up, get them in the right locations. We have some offices right now, even in California, that are down about 50% of their staff because it's not just meteorologists, right? It's administrative, it's technicians as well. And so it'll be a Band-Aid, that 125.
Looking toward the future, the Trump administration has proposed ending climate research and related projects, slashing weather satellite programs and other infrastructure, and ending efforts to monitor the ocean. What would this do to weather prediction in the country and San Diego specifically?
We're observing the weather, and that actually becomes the climate. So we were the ones and are the ones that gather the ocean data, the land data, the sky conditions. We create what we call normal averages and climate. We do that every day, no matter what. And the more you do that, the better you understand the impacts and better you understand how to predict the weather. The better you become, and the more services you can provide, more lead time, more preparation for the general public. So not having climate observations, I mean, that's a dagger. It would be a huge loss. We're not the researchers, but we provide the data to the researchers.
You are someone who has committed 32 years of your professional life to weather forecasting. What kind of effect is this having on you personally?
Yeah, this was a big change. After 32 years, I knew I had things I hadn't completed. I knew I had things I could still do. I still had the energy, the passion. It doesn't feel like work to me to monitor the weather, to predict the weather, to inform people, to educate about the weather. So it's a dramatic change. It was not something I thought of overnight and said, oh, I'm going to leave.
Given that that's the case, given that you haven't lost that passion, what's next for you?
Weather has never felt like work. I used to write the weather down on a calendar when I was 8 years old, no matter what, and that becomes climate data. So I'll be doing a lot of skiing. I got an Icon Pass. I'll be doing part-time weather. I'm spinning up a business called Weather Echo, LLC. I'll do a lot of the same work that I used to do, talking to the media, talking to government agencies, talking to the public and outreach.
So it's not an absolute farewell to Alex Tardy.
No, it's hard to get the weather out of someone once it's in them, yeah. We're all under weather threats, and those are not going away.
Here's a look at what we're working on for tomorrow in the KPBS newsroom. On NPR's Morning Edition, we take a look at how the Trump administration's immigration raids will impact industries that rely on those who are in the U.S. without legal status. And the North County LGBTQ Resource Center is offering additional resources to immigrants in the community. We learn more about their efforts on KPBS Midday Edition. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. I'm John Carroll. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, air, restoration, and flood services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.